Pardon the noise, the heater has just now turned on, and mostly because it's cold down here and I'm regretting my life choices all of a sudden. So, I want to get on to the subject of wrestling singlets. Now, I've written about this quite a bit on FetLife and Meat Fighters and whatnot, but apparently I have not done that for this group yet, which is kind of surprising to me, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Your primary brands that you're going to find out there, for as far as like the old school brands, are going to be like your Matman, Brute, Asics, Adidas, Cliff King, and that's going to be like your kind of old school ones. Now you do have other ones that have come out over the last decade or so, which are more sublimated based. That's going to be like your KO Sports, which I've heard some good things about. Your Elite, which is not necessarily sublimated, but it is a newer company. Sublimation Kings, Takedown Sportswear, and I think Wrestling Market has their own brand. Suplex does their own brand now. So there's a bunch of them that are out there, and we're gonna go ahead. Sublimation Kings, Takedowns, and I can't remember the last one. So those are gonna be your basics brands, and I can't speak for all of them because obviously I don't have the resources to have one of every brand. I guess by now I probably could have, but I like to go with a lot of times things that I know better rather than just anything. So I've only taken the risks a few times, and so things to know about certain brands. Like I feel like Cliff King is one that you want to pay a little bit more attention to their size chart because they do fit a little bit on the tighter side. Whereas Matman, for their stock singlets, I think run a little bit large. Whereas when you get into like their reversibles, their nylon double knits, and heavyweight singlets, they tend to run a little bit on the tighter side. So you might want to go and actually follow their size chart and go a size up for there. So for Matman, I usually wear a medium, and for their heavier stuff, I tend to prefer a size up. But actually with the heavyweight, I ended up getting a size up and then buying the size down again because I like the fit a little bit better. And I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in between there. But I think that when you're talking about a nylon double knit or a reversible singlet, you really want to make sure that you go error on the side of looser, especially if you have testicles, because there can be a little bit less forgiving than the spandex varieties. And since we've kind of digressed onto the subject of materials, let's go ahead and get into that. The one I'm wearing right now, this is a Cliff King. It's their collegiate singlet, and it is a nylon lycra. And so nylon lycra is going to usually have a lot more shine to it. It also has a better stretch factor to it, but it's more springy than a polyester blend. And so like your Elite Sports is going to be a polyester blend. A lot of your Asics are going to be a polyester blend. So those are going to tend to be a little bit lighter. And I do have, here we go. I believe, if I remember correctly, I think this is the Asics Conquest singlet. We'll bring it back up for a little bit, and I'll explain why it doesn't have gripper elastics on the legs. But it's a nice singlet. It's well made. But this and their snap down singlet, which I like better, and I did bring that. These are, I believe, if I remember correctly, these are a polyester blend. So they have a little bit more of a matte finish. It's feeling a little bit like a nylon blend. So nylon's usually going to be a little bit stiffer, a lot more springy, and it's going to have a cooler feel to it, whereas polyester is going to have more of kind of a light cotton feel to it. And so, and I think that personally, I find that polyester blends tend to just get looser and lighter over time, whereas nylon I think actually holds up better over time. So I would say that, you know, personally I prefer a nylon lycra blend. Now, I mentioned this already, this is a nylon double knit by Matman. It's their, I think, number 86 singlet, if I remember correctly. And I got this one because, you know, I saw photos of it and it looks really great, especially in the kind of the junk area, because it just kind of creates this loose little, yeah, never mind, you can see it in the photos. But anyways, you can see here, like, it's got almost no stretch laterally. It's got about the same amount, you know, vertically. And so the thing about that is that it's not going to stretch and move with you like a nylon lycra or polyester elastane or whatever. Lycra and elastane are the same thing. They're just different brands, basically. Nylon or spandex being, I believe, or lycra, one of those two, is going to be the DuPont brand, which is the original founders of spandex and lycra. But this, it's just the knit that causes it to stretch, not the fabric content. And so this is going to kind of always be the same tension, and your body, when it moves, wants to have releases in that tension. So this would be like as forgiving on everything as like wearing denim, kind of. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's definitely the case. It's warmer. For this one I got a medium, and you can see here the brand is still on there and almost completely legible. The thing about that is that I wear my singlets a lot, so, and wash them a lot, so they tend to not have that anymore. This one I've had for years and years and years, and it still has the logo on it, which tells you how often I wear that one. I do sometimes, especially when it's colder. And so this one is a nylon lycra as well, but this is the reversible singlet, so you can see it's blue on the inside, red on the outside, and you can flip it whatever way. Get to that in a moment, but the thing about this is because the lycra is doubled up and stitched in such a way it's tighter, and then you have got more resistance on that stretch, so it's going to be very similar in feel to that nylon double knit. So it's going to be heavier and it's going to be stiffer, and I said this was Matman, I'm wrong, it's Asics. And so this is a little bit less forgiving, and I'd probably recommend, if you're going to buy a reversible singlet, go ahead and go up a size than what you normally would, because it's going to be less forgiving in that department. Here, you guys have seen this one. This is the Matman heavyweight lycra. And what I found with this one is that, yes, the lycra is heavy. You can actually feel that it's heavier. Cliff King's singlets like this one tend to run a little bit heavier, especially the other ones that you guys have seen me wear, is also very heavy. And so it's got, you know, a fair amount of stretch to it. It feels a lot more like a standard weight wrestling singlet. It's so you don't have to be as strict as with the double knit or the reversible when it comes to choosing the size on these. I actually kind of tend to prefer the medium on it, but I'm kind of in the middle there. So I think that kind of covers it. I've got one more in here that you guys have seen me wear. This is my fetishy jersey knit, so it's got the jersey ventilated holes in it, which makes it kind of transparent, as is white. So this is kind of a good thing to talk about really quick. There was a really popular singlet that I didn't get my hands on before it went out that I really liked, that was by, I believe, Asics, that had a really nice gradient pattern on it, but it had been sublimated onto white, which sublimation always is done onto white fabric, but the when you have darker colors, it tends to hide shadows and what's going on underneath the singlet a little bit more, whereas if you have a white spot on it, especially as you get damp, that becomes a lot more translucent, and so you can see things like your ass crack. Those types of things tend to show up when you have something that's white. Now with the nylon double knit, that doesn't happen, or not double knit, but the heavyweight lycra, that doesn't happen as much because the material's thicker, so it doesn't become transparent. So if you want to have a white singlet or a white section on singlet, you want to opt for a heavier weight of lycra. So like I said, when we're talking about sublimation, you guys have seen this one. It's going to be white is the actual color of the material, and the printing doesn't go all the way through. Now, depending on how they do it and what kind of printer they have, when the material stretches, you can see a little bit of whiting out happening there. You can see that the colors go white. And so the if you do have something like that, and we talked about this in groups for like Spider-Man costuming and whatnot, because it's all sublimated, and it really drives people crazy. And what somebody has recommended is actually going on with a Sharpie on the back and coloring in the blue sections blue and the red sections red, right? And that way, when it stretches, you're not going to get that ghosting out. But make sure that you throw it through a dryer before you throw it through the wash. To kind of set that ink in there. Otherwise, you're going to come out and you're going to take it off and you're going to be blue and red. So, you could use that. You could potentially use RIT dyes. I feel like I don't really like RIT dyes. They don't really work particularly well. You can get screen printing ink and use that and then dry it. Not screen printing. Oh, printing ink that you would normally use for a printer, and you just do it on the inside as you did it on the outside. It's not that expensive. You can get it at pretty much any art supply store. So that I think covers material pretty well. And so let's go ahead and go on to the leg gripper elastics. Now you see this, the collegiate style wrestling by Singlet by Cliff Keen. They're using this what's a nylon double knit rib knit for the legs here, and it's kind of my personal favorite, partially because I like this kind of styling. Now the Asics one I think has a better feel than the Cliff Keen. This is a lot more stiff, rigid, a little bit rougher. The Asics is a lot stretchier. It's a lot smoother. But this doesn't have anything sticky on here, so it's not going to pull your hairs like you would see in a traditional style. So let's go ahead and go back. I mentioned the traditional style. Here's the old school traditional style. Now this one never bothered me, but I've heard a lot of people complain about them. So this is like an elastic waistband that you would normally have in your trousers, except that it's rubberized on the outside, so it grips the skin more. And this, I've never had any problems with this one pulling hairs or grabbing skin too much. But I have heard wrestlers complain about that specifically. So what they're kind of doing now is they're kind of doing this kind of silicone coated one, so you don't get the texture of the elastic waistband in there, and this is just kind of very sticky silicone, and this is better. This is the Matman Heavyweight again. So I think that the grippers that they use in this one, it's not as quite as hair pulley as what I've seen in, and I said I'd come back to this guy. I think this is the Asics Conquest, but I could be wrong. It could be like Contender or something like that. So you see that I have cut off the elastic on this leg, and the reason for that is because the elastic that was on here was the really, really sticky, horrible silicone version, and it's one of the few that actually did pull out hairs. So there's that. This guy, I think they just hemmed it. They just did the same thing that they do up in these areas, and I found that these areas, the trims, they're pretty consistent. Everybody does pretty much the same thing, except for there was a singlet I got from Rhino that was like $5, and it fell apart the first time I put it on. They just used spandex all the way around, and the stitching just popped. And the thing is, you want to have some stretch to this material, like this one that's my homemade singlet. This does not have stretch, and so this is a pain in the ass to get into and out of, which is kind of bondagey, so I kind of like it, but it is something that is a problem with this singlet. But the stitching on here is never going to pop free, for that very reason, is that this material doesn't stretch. This material that you see on the other singlets here, that's on pretty much every other singlet in the market, it has probably 25 to 50% of the stretch that the spandex does, and so it does have limits before the stitching will pop, but it does stretch, and so it makes it easier to get in and out of the singlet. So we were still talking about how they do the leg enclosures. So here's the other clip canes that I have, and these ones I got, I think, mostly because they were on sale. But you see that it's just folded over spandex here. There is an elastic in here. It seems like it's a very smooth, flat elastic. You can see that there's not a whole lot of puckering. There's a little bit here. So it just kind of prevents it from going much further than this. But it's not too tight. And it's nice, smooth, and it slides on easily. It doesn't move around too much. And so this is actually kind of a nice place to go with your singlet. Oh dear, I've got a loose thread. Alright, so I'll come back to that one. Whereas we have this, this was Sublimation Kings, which is unfortunately like the worst singlet that I own. I know that a lot of you guys have thought that it was rather attractive, but you see this one, the space here is smaller than the other one, which is about twice as wide. So this is a lot more concentrated as far as the tightness goes. And if we actually do a side-by-side comparison, these are the same size, but you can see, like, if I stretch these holes out, the clip cane is a lot looser. It's not that they stretch the same amount, but the because this is like real narrow waistband elastic that's in here. I don't know that for sure because I haven't cut it open, but this tends to be really tight, and it's like having a tourniquet on your thigh, and that's one of the problems that I have with this singlet. Now, like I said, takedown sportswear, and I wish I could remember the other one for you guys right now because I actually really, really liked them. But they had, one of them had more of, I think that it was this style, and then one of them had it was just the a hem of the spandex, which actually is becoming more common. I'm seeing, especially in collegiate styles. I think the Rudy's does that, and a couple other styles do. That type of enclosure that's very smooth. It slides on easily. It looks good. I personally don't mind riding too much. If I have issues with chafing, I use Body Glide or something like that. So I don't mind it as much. So really the leg enclosure is actually one of the things that can be either really, really distracting or really, really comfortable in, and you don't notice as much. And so, you know, if I were to rank it, I would say that the rib knit is either one or two. The full enclosure, like what we saw in the other cliff cane, is probably right up there. Then the ones that Mattman was using, then now the silicone ones, and then finally the really, really horrible ones that that the Sublimation Kings did it. So the next thing that to really consider about a singlet is going to be the stitching that you're going to see. And I want to go ahead and, well, I feel like you might not be able to see it. Let's see if this one, nope, it's going to have to be this one. Maybe the brute will be easier to see. Okay, so you see the, this seam here creates a little ridge. This is a serger seam or flat lock seam. And so you will always have like this little mountain of sewn material that is made rough by the stitching, that's going to be basically on your skin the whole time, and it's not really that bothersome. The Mattman ones that I've considered my favorites for decades all have this style of stitch work. There are a couple of drawbacks to it. One is that you're going to see more popping of the stitches with this than you do with the kind of the more modernized athletic stitching. So what happens with this one, because really the only part that has tension on it is the part that's closest to the seam, right? And so when this stitching here can pop, and then what's going to happen next is you got this second layer of stitching, right, that can also pop, but that's going to be like the kind of second defense there. And generally, if you're stretching enough to cause that first one to pop, then the second one might still pop. But anyways, you can get little breaks in here. The singlet does not completely fall apart, which is kind of the idea, I think, with these flat lock stitches. But you can get noticeable pocket popping the stitches that can happen because of that. And so it's really, I think, rather one of the things that I've liked to see a lot more in any type of athletic spandex wear. This is like one of my favorite singlets ever. This is the just standard normal weight Matt Man singlet. It does use this, and one of the things that I find with this type of flat lock stitches, especially because we have this big gusset down here that goes through the crotch, this area that comes near the balls will basically sit right on that thinner skin, and it can actually be a little bit irritating if you've been wearing this for several hours, lounging around watching a movie or whatever. So that is something to actually keep in mind. Oh dear. And let's go ahead. This one's going to be a little bit easier to see, I think. So again, this is an A6. And you can see on this one they've used kind of that more old school type of elastic here. And it's not bothersome to me, but some people complain that it removes hair. So here, there we go. We can see that from the top. So if you look in that white section, you see how you can see the stitch all the way through. You see this on a lot of Under Armour. You see it on Tesla compression shorts, which I think are superior to Under Armour. But yeah, this is... I don't really know the name of the stitch, which would make it a lot easier for me to find the sewing machine for it, but it's kind of like a multi-needle stitch, but they've got some type of bobbin or something that's on the top that is threading back and forth here. And what these kind of do, because of the type of thread that they're using on the back and on the front, I'm guessing, that goes back and forth, is what's called a woolly nylon, or now they have a new name for it, but it's basically the same thing. And it's a stretchy thread. And so the other stitches here are, which are going straight, basically, because this stretches this way, they need to have some give, and so that woolly nylon or whatnot they put through here gives that stitching some stretch so it doesn't pop. But you'll find, especially in Under Armour, I found it more in Under Armour. I haven't seen it in happening in Tesla gear yet. But when it stretches too much and you pull on it too much, you can sometimes get those still to pop out. But I haven't seen it in like the A6 gear. I haven't seen it in any of the wrestling singlets that I have. But anyways, you can see the stitch gets narrower, so it's actually giving away some stretch there so that the stitching won't pop. But you can see on the back side, there's no ridge. And so there's less skin contact with this. There's no big lumps, nothing to rub on anything. So I think that, honestly, and the other thing is, especially right here, you can see that contrasts. And so it creates not just like a more comfortable stitch, but it can become something that can be part of the artistic design of the singlet. And so this type of stitching I find ornamental. I find it to be more effective. And I just generally like it. Now, you'll see here, and this is basically, I see this on all of these, which is on the trim here, they're using basically a twin needle on this, and they're using the woolly nylon on the back that goes back and forth. This type of stitching is not as strong as this style that's right here. So you just have the two parallel lines on the top, and that's it. Usually you'll have at least like 3, maybe 4 sometimes with this style of stitching. And so this can pop, but it does stretch a fair amount. So it's not particularly likely that it will. But again, like I said, this section here is designed not to stretch as much as this. So it's safer to use, or it's safe to use this type of stitch because the material on here doesn't stretch as much. Now this actually looks like it's just spandex. It's just been folded over several times, which again is going to, as we talked about with the double knit lycra, is going to lost my train of thought. Yeah. I apologize. I fucking hate ADHD. So we've talked about the types of material. We've talked a little bit about brands, knowing that like your, for me, the A6 Adidas supposedly elite, and couple other brands tend to run on the smaller side, right? So pay attention to that sizing. Like I said, Batman tends to be, I tend to go down a size with them. And so it really does matter. Yeah, so we've talked about sublimation, we've talked about material, fetishy things. Cut. Let's talk about cut. Yes. So, I guess it's going to be a little bit harder to see with the singlet that I'm wearing, but generally speaking, with the singlets I'm not wearing that I'm going to have to show you here. But so the first thing you'll notice about different singlets is you'll have different heights here in the front and sides. And so one of the reasons why I don't own any of the ones that come like way down here is that for one, I don't do Greco-Roman, which I think is the one that they use them more for. Sometimes I think they all use them in freestyle. But I don't really like them as much because fingers and whatnot can easily navigate into them on accident, and I think it becomes more of a distraction. I think a lot of people find them sexier because you can see the serratus anterior on the side. You might be able to see a little bit of abs, so you got a lot more skin visibility. If that's really what you want, then I might say go with compression shorts because that's going to have less loose, grippy stuff. Those tend to separate from the body more and whatnot, and I think that can be a little bit more annoying. So for me, I like the higher cuts. The one thing that I've kind of run into, and it's going to be with this singlet by Cliff Keen. And you can see here that the back is actually rather narrow here. And what I find is that despite my shoulder blades being a little bit to the inside, this will navigate to the inside and kind of get stuck between my shoulder blades. Whereas with this one, it doesn't really happen that much. It's actually pretty well covered, so I don't feel like my bones are sticking out there as much. And it's a minor thing, but it is something to keep in mind that when you have the narrower back pieces, if you can see this one's really broad. And actually most of them are like that, where they're really broad. Having that really narrow back can be a little bit of a distracting thing. So when you're picking out a singlet, I would say, kind of start, if you haven't bought any already, with the more well-known brands. Pay attention, if you're on Amazon or something like that, pay attention to the reviews. See how people have felt that they fit. Find out if that's a normal thing. So like I said, Elite Sports tends to fit a little bit on the tight side, so you want to go up a size with them. Asics and Adidas tend to be on the tighter side. Brute and Matman and Cliff Keen, I think, are a little bit more true to size. Cliff Keen can run a little bit tight, so you might want to go up a size with them. I think that mostly covers it for now. If there's anything I've missed, if you guys have questions, go ahead and ask, and like always, I'm always up to answering questions to the best of my ability. Maybe I'll just put it in the comments though for this one, but so that's kind of my input, my thoughts on wrestling singlets. Generally speaking, you can find good singlets for $20 or so. This one is the Snap Down by Asics. I think when I bought it, it was relatively cheap, but you can see actually this. How much light you can see coming through here. Maybe I need to have a light behind me, but you can see that this is definitely a thinner, lighter material. It's this singlet's probably, I think I got it before I moved to Maine, so I'm going to say it's at least 4 or 5 years old. It's still holding up. I still use it all the time. I really like this singlet. It's a very, very good singlet to start off with. If you're going to go with an Asics singlet, the Snap Down is probably the one that I would say is the one to go with. I think this Adidas one was also really cheap. I don't remember if I got this off Suplay or if I got it off of Amazon. I got it off of Suplay. I think it was the grab bag singlet, so I don't know that this one's made anymore. But it's a pretty good quality singlet. I wish I'd kind of gone up a size on it. I think those are good cheaper ones. When you get into like your mid-range ones, you're going to find that they're going to run kind of in that $40 to $55 range. And then when you start getting into like the This Matman collegiate style, I think, was $65, so it's a little bit on the more expensive, and that's kind of getting into that more sublimated range. So that that printed range tends to be in that like $65 to $120 range, depending on where you go from. And part of that is because of the artistry that goes into it. Screen printing is expensive; it's an extra step. Then I think there are a lot of things else that go into that product. So, for me, I might even actually look for secondhand sublimated ones if I wanted to go on the cheap side and wanted to have a sublimated one. And the only one that I've run into that I would not recommend is going to be the Sublimation Kings, because I think that they are not kings. I think they're shit. But we were talking about stitching. Which brings me back to this singlet. So, if I show you this side, you can see potentially, I don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera, I'm on the wrong side. Where did it go? On the side here, you can see that there's a little V here that might tell you that there is actually a seam on this side, and there's no seam on this side. And if I hold this up, you might be able to see that the singlet is shaped, right? But, so you see it's tapered in on one side and it's straight on the other, okay? If you want to have something that is shaped to somebody's body, you need to put a seam on both sides. And this is noticeable when I wear it, to some. It's noticeable to me, and that drives me crazy. Whereas you can see with any other singlet that I picked, this was just a random one I pulled up. But you see it moves out on the armpits, and it tapers in towards the waist, and then moves out again at the hips. So you can't get that. You can't get something that follows the curvature of your body if you are going with only one seam on the whole singlet. That was a cheap thing that they did. That singlet, they just cut so many quarters on it, and for like the $69 I spent on it, I don't think it's worth that. I would expect a higher quality workmanship than that. So, yeah. But yeah, the takedown's good, and I really wish I could remember the other one for you guys right now. It's another one. It's probably going to be in the top 3 search if you look for sublimated singlets. But anyways, guys, if you have questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and put them down in the bottom here. And this has gone long, so I'm saying goodbye.